Welcome to this short video I've made with 4 techniques that you can use for incorporating quotations into your writing. Now this video works together with our class. In class, we'll talk about why and when we use quotations, and then we'll also talk about some special case quotations that are called scare quotes and epigraphs. In this video, we're going to talk about some basic quotation techniques, and the reason that I put it in a video is since these are technical aspects of writing, I want you to be able to watch this video over again to make sure you have everything down cold. And also, when you go on to do projects after this class, you can refer to this video to remind you how to use these techniques. There are 4 techniques that I'm going to go over in this video, and I'll just briefly summarize them here. First, we have the seamless approach, where you incorporate quotations seamlessly into your writing. We have speech acts, where you make it seem like the writer is talking to your reader. Then we have that with no comma, which is a variation on speech acts, except the punctuation is a little bit different. And then we have the aha colon, where you point to a quotation as proof of something you've just said. Let's get started with the seamless approach. Now I call this the seamless approach because you incorporate the words of another author seamlessly into the structure of your own sentence. Or as Turabian says, you weave the quotation into the syntax of what you are writing. And for that reason, you're not going to see any commas or colons separating your words from the words of the other author, only the quotation marks. Let's look at an example to see what I mean. For all the examples in this video, I'll be working with the following academic article. The title is Translating the Transnational. It's by an author by the name of, excuse my pronunciation, Cifuentes-Goodbody, and it's from the journal Cultural Studies. Now I'm going to scroll through to the first page and then the second page, and I'm going to zoom in on this area that I have highlighted. So this is the passage that I want to work with for my hypothetical research project. What I've done is I've highlighted this text and I've copied it into this text document. Before we get started with the quoting, I just want to point out here on the top, I've put the full citation for the source using the Chicago format. And then I have the quote itself and the page number so that I remember where I got it from. With that in mind, let's talk about the seamless approach. Now, what interests me about this passage is this idea of transnational cultural flow and the exchange of information between the global south and the global north. So I want to incorporate that information into my own writing. Let me do that here below the original quote. So this is my own writing, and I've done the seamless approach in the sense that I've included 2 bits of text from Cifuentes-Goodbody, the idea of cultural exchange and the idea of configurations of power. And as you can see, these 2 pieces of the author's text blend in seamlessly with my own text. The only way you would know they are quotations is because I have these quotation marks here. And of course, at the end, I also have my parenthetical citation using Chicago author date format. So I have the author's last name, the year, a comma, and then the page where I got the text that I'm quoting. Now note here that the period comes after the parenthetical citation, not before it. Moving on to the next technique, we have speech acts. Now I call these speech acts because it is as if the author is speaking or declaring his or her opinion to your reader. In these sorts of quotations, you usually use the author's last name followed by verbs that suggest speaking, like the verbs I've listed here. And on the technical side, you always put a comma before the start of the quotation. And the quotation starts with a capital letter, and you need to make sure that your quotation could stand alone as a complete sentence. Here we are back again with Cifuentes-Goodbody, and we're looking at the speech acts approach. So again, I have the same passage, but this time I want to make it seem as if this author is speaking directly to my reader. Now here's my attempt of using the SpeechX approach with this quotation. You can see that I have the author's last name, and then I have one of those speaking verbs, like observes. I could just as easily say notes, maintains, says. And then I have the quotation itself. Now note that there is a comma here before the quotation, and that the quotation itself starts with a capital letter. If you look at the original text, which I've taken from right here, you'll notice that in the original text it doesn't start with a capital T. And you'll also notice that the sentence doesn't end here, even though I put the period here at the end of my quotation. These are both acceptable practices in most genres of academic writing, in most disciplines. It's perfectly all right to change a lowercase letter to a capital letter, or add a period at the end of a quotation, as long as you respect the original grammar of the sentence. So this sentence here reads like a complete sentence, starting with a capital letter and ending with a period, and in fact it could stand on its own as a complete sentence. The final thing I want to draw your attention to is the parenthetical citation, which is right here. Now, because I mentioned the author's last name in my own writing, I don't need to include that name in my parenthetical citation. So I can just have the year of publication, comma, and the page number. So to sum up SpeechX, we have the author's last name, we have a speaking type verb, we have a comma, and then a complete sentence that starts with a capital letter and ends with a period. And of course, I always need to be sure to include my in-text citation. Next, we have that with no comma. Now you can use the same speaking verbs that you use in the SpeechX technique. The difference is that instead of using a comma, you use the word that. And for that reason, the quotation does not start with a capital letter. However, it should be able to stand alone as a complete sentence. Since the that without a colon technique is basically a variation of the SpeechX technique, I'm going to work with the same example that I just showed you, but I'm going to make a few tweaks, a few changes. The first thing is I'm going to remove the comma and add that. And the second thing is I'm going to turn my capital T back to a lowercase t. You can see that my quotation still could stand alone as a complete sentence, but it blends in with the syntax of the sentence that I'm writing. And of course, I still have my parenthetical citation telling my reader where I got this citation from. Now it's time for the aha colon. Now, I've come up with this name because I base it in those courtroom dramas that are so famous in the United States, where you have a lawyer speaking to a jury and he points to a piece of evidence and goes, "Aha, as you can see by this evidence, the defendant is guilty," or "the defendant is innocent." So that's where the name comes from. In terms of the technique itself, you begin with your own complete sentence, then you have a colon, and then you add your quotation. And that quotation should be a complete sentence, and it should serve as proof of the thing that you've just said, of the thing you've just written. And the quotation, on the technical side, should always start with a capital letter and should be a complete sentence. Actually, it could be multiple sentences, as we'll see. For the previous 3 examples, I've looked at this, I've been focusing on this first sentence of the passage. But in my last example, for the aha colon, I want to look at this last sentence, and the idea that the global north can still influence the movement of cultural products, even outside its own boundaries. So here's my example of the aha colon. What I have here is a statement that I make. It's a complete sentence. Then I have the colon, and then I have the quotation that serves as proof for the statement I've just made. And that quotation is a full sentence. It starts with a capital T, and it ends with a period. Now let's focus on that period for 1 second. You may notice that the period is here after the parenthetical citation, and not here inside the closed quotation marks, like in previous examples. The reason for that is when you have your parenthetical citation at the end of a quotation, you should put the period here after the closed parentheses. The other thing you may have noticed is that this therefore in the original quotation makes sense within the passage as it was originally written, but here in the context that I want to use it, it doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't make grammatical sense. It doesn't scan. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to omit it. Now I'm going to delete it, and the way that I tell my reader that I've deleted it is that I add 3 periods, or what's known as an ellipsis. And that tells the reader that I have taken out one or several words. Now you can use this technique to make sure that the grammar of your quotations fits the grammar of your sentence. And you're free to take out whatever you want as long as you are maintaining the integrity of what was originally said. Now that we've looked at the 4 techniques, I want to talk about block quotations. Now before I talk about block quotations, I just want to clarify that all of the examples I've shown you up until now are examples of inline quotations. That is to say, the quotation is in line with the rest of your text. Now, generally speaking, when you're working with inline quotations, your quotation should be limited to a complete sentence or a sentence fragment. However, sometimes you get into situations where you have multi-sentence quotations and long quotes, and you'll need to adjust the formatting so that it becomes a block quotation. And I'll show you what I mean by adjust the formatting in just a moment. What I want to clarify now is that block quotations, even though the formatting is different, you can use any of the 4 techniques that we've just discussed to introduce the quote. And finally, on a last technical note, it's important to remember that when you're using block quotations, you do not need quotation marks because the formatting of the block quotation indicates to your reader that it is a quotation. For the block quote example, I'm using Microsoft Word instead of the program I've been using up to now because I need to show you how the formatting changes when you use a block quotation. Now here I have the quotation we've been working with all along, and it's a long quotation. It's 7 lines long? Almost 100 words? So that means I'm moving into block quotation territory. Here's the text that I want to incorporate my quotation into. And like I said in the previous slide, I can use any technique. In this case, I'm going to use the colon. So I'm going to put the colon here, and I'm going to use this quotation as proof of what I've just said. Now, the way you know something is a block quote is because it is indented. Usually there's ½ an inch between your text and the text that you are quoting. Like I said, there are no quotation marks. The formatting is all your reader needs in order to know that it's a quotation. Now, one little point that I want to draw your attention to is that in this case with block quotations, the period actually goes at the end of the sentence, not after the closed parentheses. So when you're using quotation marks and your in-text citation comes at the end of the quotation, you would put the period here at the end, but in this case, since it's a block quote and there are no quotation marks, the period goes right here. And then once I've added my block quotation, I just continue writing using the regular margins I've been using up until now. Now you'll see a lot of variations of block quotes. For example, in student papers, you might see that everything is double-spaced. Or you might see that everything is double-spaced except for the block quotes. So it might look like this. Again, you'll want to check with your professor what is the format that they prefer. In the end, the most important thing is that your block quote be indented ½ an inch from the rest of the text. So I hope this video has been helpful. I just wanted to end with a few references that we'll be looking at in class, but for those of you who are just watching this on the internet, these might be some resources you wanted to look into if you wanted some more information on the finer points of quoting other sources.